where we might rather think of John Lennon and the beautiful futures that we might think about. This is a take of how we might encounter with the new possibilities of technology rather difficult settings. And in particular, what we want to talk about very briefly and actually indeed talk and discuss with you is how to deliver higher education in challenging learning environments. Just maybe briefly, why am I speaking to you today? And to introduce this topic, I myself work on hybrid education for hybrid regimes as a project title since quite a while now, kickstarted with the work of an NGO that is probably well known, Curon, that delivered a platform, online learning platform to incoming refugees, in particular in Germany, who could not yet join or enroll universities officially, and in the meanwhile could earn credit points through online learning. And it was like sort of a catalyst thinking for me of what could be the possibilities with our new tools, digital tools, to deliver higher education to people who might not be able to come to a campus and join a seminar. Obviously, this whole topic was hyperscaled during the pandemic, and we learned how we could deliver higher education in situations where we couldn't encounter each other face to face anymore. And with these learnings, I joined the CEU Democracy Institute 4 years ago, which in itself is situated in a rather difficult place of higher education, since under the Orban government in Hungary, Central European University was not allowed to deliver any more credited higher education degrees. Nevertheless, there's a couple of CEU professors born and raised in higher education, so to speak, here in Hungary, who don't want to let go of the idea to deliver higher education, critical knowledge production and thinking modes to students within Hungary. And there's where this whole idea of hybrid education for hybrid regimes was cultivated over the last years, and then was sort of formed into a very concrete project with the start of the full-scale invasion by Putin and Russia into Ukraine. What came together was an ad hoc initiative that called itself the Invisible University for Ukraine, which is a reminiscent of the flying universities that already in the 1980s found ways of how to bring critical-minded people together within authoritarian circumstances. And this flying invisible university, within a couple of weeks, was able to recruit really high-level educators from across the globe, with a special focus on really also having professors from Ukraine participating in lecturing. So not only have, so to speak, Westerners Ukraine-splaining to students in Ukraine of what is going on, but to ensure that there would be like mutual dialogue in between the perspectives. And this is where, after setting up with the digital tools, Moodle, Zoom, thinking about of how to deliver also asynchronic possibilities of participating in seminars for Ukrainian students that were dispersed then across Europe, even though quite some still being present within Ukraine. Once this set up and we got into a run of it, I personally encountered the situation that we had a Zoom seminar. We're in the midst of deep discussion, and one after the other student dropped a line in the chat and said, "Listen, I have to excuse myself. There's an error right now. We have to go to the bunker." And sort of this emotional confrontation of, this is real, this is happening, and even though I'm not there, it strikes me just where I sit, that the people I'm discussing with are experiencing something that that you usually wouldn't expect or anticipate, obviously, in a higher education seminar. And with that, it was clear that there is a challenge to tackle, and one of the ways of how the Invisible University was quite successful in making sense of this challenge is by having a special emphasis on mentoring. And this is where I'm very happy that Oha now will introduce us a little bit to the work she does, besides, of course, pursuing her PhD at the Central European University in History. She, from the beginning, filled the position of how, first of mentoring herself, students of the Invisible University for Ukraine, but then also starting to reflect on what can mentoring mean and what is happening in this mentoring space. And with that, Olha, I would like to hand over to you.
Okay, you can hear me now, most probably. Thank you very much. So yeah, I was mentor at the very beginning. It was actually funny because I thought that it was just another volunteering for Ukrainian students, but it happened to be a nice job for more than 3 years because we are working for 5 semesters already. This mentoring was introduced almost immediately. And the general idea was to have informal, friendly atmosphere and sessions without recording when students can make their mistakes in English or academic mistakes, speak without guest lecturers or professors. The mentors were mostly PhD students, but also some very advanced MA students. And we tried to introduce personal approach and guidance to our students, which worked well. Um, Also, other idea was as war damaged the students' education in too many ways. So different students have different challenges with source access, mental issues, like planning for their education or doing their research, or some universities were closed for some period of time or for good. So very different issues, and we tried to answer them with this mentoring when mentors could speak with students and ask about their needs and then react. Or consult the UFO coordinators, like Invisible University coordinators and directory for a better solution. They could also faster see the change in students because war is very dynamic. We have a lot of tragic events happening at some point, and students just drop off studying or cannot handle some topics or need to switch to other topic in their research. So a lot of issues which we cannot actually plan. And I think that mentoring went well because we could find solution and even had some strategic planning for major needs of students. Just one example that we have more and more students who cannot leave Ukraine. Obviously, male students cannot cross the border, but female students also stay because they have families on the front line, so they don't want to leave country in case that something tragic happens. So obviously they have issues with academic English, source access, and so on. So we can help with a CU library loan, or mentors can share the sources, and it really helps. And I also wanted to share with you some chronological perspective on mentoring that we gathered. Obviously, I would not be speaking about statistics because we didn't have a proper research on that. But that's the general impression that we share among mentors. So in 2022, all mentoring was more about emotional support. There was a visible desire to share and speak about war and fresh memories from students, to explain war horrors, and find understanding and support, especially among international students or their peers. They also wanted, but not really could, held conversations about the triggering topics. I even had it at my mentoring session that we started to speak about missile attack in my home city when more than 20 people were killed, like civilians on the square. And students wanted to speak about that, but they couldn't. And also other issue was that students were in acute danger. So Daniel already mentioned that a lot of students had to stop in between the session and go to the shelter. But it really didn't work well because part of students just missed sessions and they couldn't catch up. And the planning horizon was very short for most of Ukrainians, so it was like 1 or 2 days. So if you have students and give the scholarship for students for 3 months, they don't really plan because they don't plan further than next week. In 2023, it really changed. So we had more academic direction in the conversations with students. The studies of most universities were renewed, and the new challenge was rather severe electricity cuts. So some of our students had only 1 or 2 hours of electricity per day. So it was pretty difficult with online teaching. And universities started to be closed in winter because of both missile attacks and electricity cuts. So we passed that. Thanks God, in 2024, we didn't have such severe electricity cuts, although we prepared, but because of international aid and Ukrainian air defense get better, so students had more electricity and more time. But these constant missile and drone attacks, which now happen at night, they didn't intervene with mentoring sessions, so students didn't need to go to shelter now, but they couldn't sleep well. And that also influenced mentoring sessions a lot because they were tired, they were sleepy, they were quite passive after having missile attack at night. So it was very difficult to turn them into the conversation, or they couldn't focus properly. And finally, in 2025, even this situation is better now a bit. But we have a general feeling that everyone expects that they can live now a normal life in terms of war, but they cannot do it properly. So they try to finish their deadlines or graduate. They still try to do a lot of volunteering. So we have mostly active students. They join us because they want to know more. They want to further develop, and that's why most probably that we have a lot of volunteering for the front line or for humanitarian aid. They also have jobs and studies. So students are quite overexhausted now, especially because of this civil society engagement and their own studies at home universities. And they also expect that some topics or events would not have emotional impact anymore, but it has. And when something tragic happens with their family or friends, both in like civil cities or on the front line, they don't expect that they will react emotionally and it would disrupt their studies, but it happens. And it's still very difficult to plan properly. So the planning horizon is about a month now, but when you start to speak with the students about some educational planning for 2 or 3 months, they cannot really do that. Also, we have some other issues nowadays with mentoring, which we can also discuss, but Daniel also has his own questions for that. So we still need to carefully select the mentors and the topics for discussion because it's still difficult to deal with traumatized students and sensitive topics. So we still have some issues with that. Also, this individual approach and flexibility, checking on students' need and adjusting mentoring sessions to student needs can be quite confusing for mentors because we need to define their role more and discuss it with them. We also try different methods that would encourage students to be more active without overloading them, but that's very difficult when they are exhausted and just start to be passive already on third or fourth session. And our mentors are also from Ukraine or they are from international universities, but they have families or friends in Ukraine. They also are compassionate towards their students. So if something bad happens, they also suffer mentally. They encounter tragic events and they still need to speak about some sensitive topics. So we need to support mentors as well. So yeah, we would be grateful if you have some comments on these issues, how to deal with these issues. And Daniel, your questions?
Yes, now. We indeed prepared some questions to the audience. So rather than we are now happy to take your questions on what we just all told, we actually have a lot of questions into this peer group because we are very convinced that in this audience there are people who might have experiences that are valuable to us. So I think the obvious first one is whether or not you might be able to think of role modeling for mentoring that could be useful for the UFO work in the future. So maybe you were a participant in a project, or maybe you encountered projects that had if not the same, but similar sort of emotional um, distressful environments to handle with, and how could they prepare better for the role of mentoring? That would be our first question, if you have some direction you could turn us to. The second question we carry around is how or what kind of digital platforms and tools could be interesting for us to keep in touch with alumni from the Invisible University for Ukraine, sort of community building for students that maybe already 2 years or so ago did visit a seminar, are not yet any more participant, but still might be interesting for the community to have some sort of a way to connect to each other. And thirdly, the last question we wanted to pose, and I hope that would kick us off into a discussion where the audience could join in, is what kind of experiences or pedagogical ideas would you have to turn from the online discussion experience to the offline in-present experience? So maybe just a word on how the UFU concept works is actually to have one seminar, mostly purely online seminars and mentoring sessions. And then at the end of a semester, you would have either winter or summer school where some selected participants would then actually meet in person here in Hungary, mostly at the premises of the Central European University. And indeed, it made for not easy situations of people who might have been comfortable to participate online, then turn into in-present discussant, and maybe you would know of how to have this transformation smoothened out. These would be three questions we would be interested to hear from you, if you would want to chip in, or obviously if you have some question for either or how me, you're also welcome to drop those.